to the Emergency Care Improvement Support Team podcast series. I'm here with Chris Green, Head of Information, who's here to talk to us about the role of information within our team and the wider NHS. So, Chris, tell me about yourself and how you got into the NHS and to ECIST.
Thanks, Keely, and hi, everyone. My name's Chris Green. I'm the Head of Information for the team. I've been working for the NHS for around about 16, 17 years now, so I think, bearing in mind the rest of our team, I'm comparatively inexperienced. Our team is comprised of around 45 to 50 people. We've got a wealth of experience ranging all across the urgent emergency care pathway, from clinicians to GPs, community care, social care leads, ambulance leads, operational senior managers. I started off my NHS life in the primary care trust back in the day, and kind of just progressed through there into CCGs, spent some time in the community, and then spent 7 really happy years at a trust in East Kent. Been working for the team now for about 6 years. Thoroughly enjoy it, seeing it go through quite a transformation. So yeah, really love working for the NHS.
Wonderful. So what have you been up to over the past 12 months with supporting the wider NHS?
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, obviously, for everybody. And our role has certainly changed over the past 12 months in line with everybody else's, really. But I think my role can really be summed up in kind of 3 key areas. There's the COVID operational work, which I've been involved with. There's the day-to-day operational role that ECIST plays to both providers and to the wider NHS England for Improvement. And also in planning, really. So COVID work, right from the beginning, I've been involved in the COVID discharge data cell, which has been responsible for some of the daily collections that have been asked for by acute and community providers. Trying to look and understand at not just numbers of patients, but really why patients are in hospital. And I think I'll probably pick up on that in a few minutes' time, really. The day-to-day operational planning, that kind of is really driven from work that we have historically done. So we've always been working with organisations looking at performance in the widest sense of the word, not just kind of the standard 4-hour performance, but really looking at all of the urgent and emergency care pathway. And we've been using the tools that have been developed within the team over the past few years to really help try and understand what's going on, whether we can do something about it, what that might look like, and understand the improvement journey that providers have been on. And then the third stream that I've been talking about is about planning. So once again, we've developed a number of tools within the team, not just from myself, the wider team, trying to understand and utilise the experience of other people. And they're really about understanding what might happen in the future. So we've got 2 main tools for that. One of them is the emergency department staffing tool, which utilises historical data to understand what's been going on, but then also looks at how many doctors, how many nurses you have on at any one time during the day and the week, understanding productivity so that we can work out whether we do have enough capacity in order to meet the patient demand. And then the one that's really kind of come to the fore over the past 6 to 12 months is really the medium to long-term forecasting for the amount of capacity that will be needed in hospital. And I'm talking about that from a physical capacity type of view, which is beds. How many beds do we need, split by specialty, split by elective emergency care, etc., etc. And our tool, which allows you to use historical data to forecast what's going to happen over the next 18 months, has really been utilised by a number of acute providers to work out exactly how much capacity they will need over the next year and a half, taking on board all the issues that have happened before. So it's been a challenging 12 months, but so is the whole of the NHS, but a really exciting one as well. And I think one of the things that I've really liked is meeting new people. So there are a number of different groups out there, such as the COVID daily discharge cell, and these would be people that historically I probably wouldn't have come into contact with, but trying to understand who they are, what they do, what their position is within the wider NHS, and understanding how we can use data to understand the improvement journey.
So what do you think are the biggest challenges for the NHS in terms of data analysis?
I think the main one is kind of what you just said in the question, actually, is around data. Okay, so the NHS is absolutely awash with data. We have data coming out of our ears for literally everything, mainly kind of front loaded in terms of the urgent emergency care pathway. So data around ambulance providers, data around acute providers. We have so much. And I suppose the question is what do we do with that? What do we understand by it? What can we use it for? And actually something which I've been talking about for a number of years is really how you can transform data into something. So data into information, which is just kind of simply plotting on time series, maybe putting a bit of intelligence around it. So using techniques such as statistical process control, but then actually understanding, well, actually it's going up because of something, and then putting an action plan around that to make sure that we can bring that down in lines with where we plan to be. What we have to balance that with, though, is the operational use of good quality data, but then equally with the burden that can place on acute community ambulance primary care providers. And that's a really delicate balancing act at the minute, because obviously what we've tried to do is we've used historical data sources, but we've had to kind of put things in place, which has meant, can we add X metric, Y metric, etc., and putting definitions around that, guidance out around that, making sure that every provider in the country is adhering to that guidance, and that kind of that thoughtfulness that has been put into those metrics has actually been a really, really significant challenge. But I think the other one that has really come to the fore is that everybody in the NHS has done such a fantastic job over the past 12 months in terms of dealing with the operational pressure, but also how that has impacted them personally as well. But the thing that's kind of struck me is that there are so many different teams that are looking at data and doing something with it. So, somebody might take a piece of data, turn it into a dashboard, push it out to somebody else, but then they take that and copy and paste it into a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. And so one of the biggest challenges for me is actually trying to understand who they are and what we can do to better joint work with them. So yeah, they're kind of my biggest challenges.
And so how do you link up with the wider teams in NHS England and improvement?
Yeah, I think the good thing for us as a team is we're well known, and that's kind of not in a boastful type way. We're well known because we don't hide. The work that we do is well known. We publicise it. We do things like this podcast series. We've got our own YouTube channel. We've got our own NHS Futures websites. We're quite prolific on social media such as Twitter and LinkedIn. So what we try and do is we try and say, what are other people doing? And so there's a few different teams kind of been working with quite closely over the past 2 to 3 years, really. I think the first kind of couple of years of my time within the team was just kind of learning about how the wheels turn in such a large organisation. But the few teams that I have kind of spent a lot of time with recently are particularly the economics team in England. Absolute fantastic resource. The knowledge and skill set that they have is absolutely fantastic. And a recent piece of work they've been looking at is around statistical modelling for the emergency department. So much more kind of looking at the demand side, but not in terms of just looking at. And I've done predictive work for ED before, not just looking at the past 6 week rolling average. They will use demographic data. They will use epidemiological data. They'll use data from multiple different sources to try and understand what is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 to even a much more longer term forecast. Also been working with the teams such as the COVID daily discharge cell, led by people like Andrew Laycock. Absolutely fantastic. The work that we've been trying to do, putting in place things at quite a scale. Some of the data collections that we've put in place over the past 12 months have been completed at a much greater time scale than in kind of previous memory, really, because we kind of scaled back what has been done. We've got the right people in place, we've put the guidance out there, we've really understood exactly what we're going to do with the data so that we can actually be much clearer about what it is that we want, why we want it, and what are we going to do with it in the first place. There's also the central analytical team, led by Medula Sori. Absolutely a great resource there. Once again, the dashboards they develop, mainly on Tableau, have been so well utilised in both briefings, in just the day-to-day running of the NHS. Really great resource. And then there's loads of other teams as well. So there's the improvement analytical team run by Sam Riley. Fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people will have come across her and her team's work. A really great resource. And so, you know, the challenge for us all is understanding what's out there, because I think certainly in this time, but I think going forward is we have to become more efficient with the way in which we work. And we have to understand what other people are doing so that there's no duplication of effort, so we become much more efficient, and just create one clear vision of what's going on.
Thank you. My next question is, how does the team use data and where do you get it from? Yeah,
so there's a few different sources of data that we use. I think the main one is probably the daily urgent emergency care SITREP data that providers have to submit by about 11 o'clock every day. And that's something that we've utilised for a number of years now. So when I joined the team, I think one of the biggest challenges was a lot of the data was just at a provider level. And if I take the trust I used to work at, for example, we had 3 main sites, all very different, but there was also a couple of urgent emergency care centres. So looking at data and analytics just from a provider level doesn't really provide any greater granularity than you would already have. And so what I kind of instigated was getting data at a site level, so understanding exactly what's happening at all the hospitals around the country. And what I did was created a relatively simple dashboard that uses techniques I was talking about earlier around statistical process control. It looks at some kind of short-term forecasting modules. It allows for benchmarking and baseline comparisons. However, I mean, we would steer away from that as a team. We would look at your historical performance and benchmark against that rather than other organisations. But the whole point about it is really simplicity from complexity. The data is really complex, okay? But what you want to do is you want to say to people, well, actually, this is the area that you want to focus on. Don't worry about over here. This is all normal variation. Don't worry about it. No noise happening over here. However, you should have a look at the proportion of beds that are occupied by long stay patients, for example, is a very hot topic. And actually we focus on that particular area. So the dashboard that I produce comes out every day now. It goes to around about 3,000 people, both from a national level, regional level and a local level. And once again, that's completely word of mouth. We started sending it out just to our team, which was at the time probably about 30 people. And that has just grown and grown and grown. It's used for regional planning. It's used for some of the national briefings, and I think it's one of those things that actually what we just do is we just push the data out there, and you kind of like going, you know, if it's useful, great, you know, more than happy to put more people on distribution list, but not being forceful around it. So we use it to look at our improvement journey and particularly look at the work that we've done to make sure that it has achieved what we hoped it would. But data doesn't lie. So if you're doing an improvement piece of work, you need to have a look at it. And if it hasn't done what you want, you need to then be able to go back and have a look at and understand why that is.
Awesome. Thank you. So how would an organisation get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I suppose there's kind of 4 different ways, really. One, they would just speak to their ECIST lead if they are currently an ECIST a site that is being supported by the team. They would just contact me via that way. My email is chrisgreen@nhs.net, so people contact me directly. Some of the regional teams get in contact just because, you know, if you work in a team for long enough, as I have, my six-year anniversary was actually yesterday. that a number of organisations and teams already know me,
Congrats.
so they will contact. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, there's no badge or anything like that, so maybe that's for 10 years. We'll have to work on that one. Or they can find me on social media, on Twitter at Chris Green NHS. More than happy to take any questions, comments, and I think that's kind of what I've been talking about all through this process is that just really open to anybody in terms of what they're looking at regarding urgent emergency care data and analytics. And if it's something that I haven't looked at before, I just see that as a challenge and would really welcome that opportunity.
Wonderful. Finally, my last question for you is, what would your best 3 tips for people looking at data be?
Only 3. So definitely simplicity from complexity. Okay, so as I talked about earlier, is that the NHS, as my colleague and boss Pete Gordon always said, that the NHS is called a complex adaptive system. And so when we try and solve a complex problem, our immediate thought is, well, it will need a complex solution. That's not actually the case. And the quote that I share from Einstein, that's unsurprisingly the only similarity I have between the two of us, is you make something as complex as it needs to be, no more. And so actually, when I look at a problem, and some of my old operational bosses, when I worked at a provider, we just used to sit down and we used to build up analysis to start off from a really, really simple point, and maybe it might be a simple plot of data, but actually just building up those layers of complexity. The second one is definitely don't be afraid to kind of try things out, okay, and see whether they stick. So you might kind of go, well, I wonder whether we can predict the amount of people coming through the front door who are going to go to the same day emergency care, for example. That's just a relatively poor suggestion, but it's the don't be afraid to try new things, but at the same point, don't always look at new things. So some people are often drawn to shiny new things, okay, a shiny new car or whatever, a watch or whatever it is. But actually, with us, there might be a new piece of technology, a new business intelligence platform, and it's like, oh yeah, we should just go and use that. Well, hang about. How would people get access to it? How much does it cost? How long would it take us to implement, etc., etc. And I think the third and final point is understand what it is you're trying to achieve. And that's the real kind of the key for me, was that I used to get asked questions, and with the greatest respect to people who used to ask me those questions, they used to be fairly ambiguous. And so if you ask an analyst an ambiguous question, don't be surprised if they give you an ambiguous response. What you really want is, and I studied marketing at university, not that you would know it, but the shotgun versus rifle analogy really, really works here. Okay, if I fire a shotgun, I might hit a target, but chances are 80% of the pellets are going to go elsewhere. Whereas if I fire a rifle, it's going to go straight to it. So if the exact question you're asking me is, do you think there's a correlation between the number of critical care beds and the ability to meet our 18-week pathways? That's a specific question, and I can go away and I can focus on that piece of work. So just be really, really clear about what it is that you're trying to achieve when looking at data. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great tips.
No problem.
So keep it simple. Don't be afraid of doing new things, and always be clear of what you're trying to achieve with your data.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Really, really helpful and lovely to speak to you.
Yeah, nice speaking to you too, Keely.